But among those men was my own dad. Dad left home at 7 a.m. and returned at 6 p.m. That 55-hour work week was when he didn't work overtime, or take a second job, or go to school at night. Often, though, my dad and many dads in our neighborhood put in 60 to 80 hours per week, including overtime, school, and commuting. Sometimes our home must have seemed less his castle than his mortgage. Eventually, Dad got his reward, managing a company in Holland. The company moved our family, but Mom found Holland too lonely. Dad put his company on notice, moved the family back to the U.S., and stayed in Holland until he could join us. Once we were back in the United States, though, my dad's age, and having just quit his last job, kept him from finding a job managing another company. He was soon selling Fuller brushes door to door, so my sister and I could go to college, where, ironically, I would learn why he should be on my enemy list. For years, I never asked my dad how he felt selling Fuller brushes, but once he did tell me how empty he felt banging on doors, and how bad he felt that the promises to Mom had amounted to nothing. These realities were in such stark contrast to my theories of male privilege that it stopped me in my tracks. You may be wondering, if men have problems, why aren't they speaking up? Sharing fears and feelings will happen more slowly for men than with any other group. That's because although men, like women, receive love by solving problems for others, the process it takes men to solve problems involves a more complete repression of men's own problems. A man doesn't tell his army sergeant that he too has some problems and the sergeant should consider them. That doesn't leave the man becoming an officer and a gentleman. It leaves him a failure and a reject. And most men don't notice a lot of women rushing to a movie called A Failure and a Reject. For men, success has always been the best preventative against rejection. Success comes from repressing feelings, not expressing feelings. For women, expressing weakness and fear attracts a savior. For men, expressing weakness and fear attracts contempt. Hearing a man complain makes a woman feel like a mother, not a lover. Complaining was part of women's evolutionary heritage. For men, complaining is an evolutionary shift. Women will not respect men until they speak up, but this does not mean women will respect men as soon as they speak up. The reason women ultimately respect a man who speaks up is because he must jump over hurdles. His willingness to do it shows he cares, and his ability to do it earns respect. However, a man needs to let a woman know that his intent in speaking up is to have a more intimate relationship with an equal partner, that to not speak up is to treat her like a child. Perhaps the toughest hurdle for a man who speaks up is being called a woman hater. He feels like he's being hit below the belt. He knows it is not the men who confront women directly that women need to fear. It is the men who fear confronting women because they don't think there's any hope, or they know that she'll never understand, or they're unwilling to risk being called a woman hater. When men do not speak up, it demonstrates fear of women and contempt for women's lack of courage. That can't coexist with loving a woman as an equal partner. Another hurdle. When Dr. Laura Schlesinger researched 10 stupid things men do to mess up their lives, she said, "I asked my male listeners to send me suggestions for the stupid things men do. I got thousands of responses of the most moving, vulnerable, meaningful material from men. But women have not been open to hearing it. Women feel angry and threatened by men's feelings. They don't really want men to be sensitive, just sensitive to their feelings." Unquote. Fortunately, many women feel supported when men speak up. And many women are feeling so strongly about the need to create a better world for children that they're speaking up even when men are silent. The man in charge of 1-800-FATHERS hotline told me that more than half the calls they receive are calls from women. Often the woman is a second wife who sees how much her husband loves his children, and she wants him to be able to be more involved. Often she's angry at him for placating his ex, and shocked that the system can allow his ex to prevent him from being with his own children. Millions of women will be second wives, and millions more won't, because the man they love is still in shock at his last transition from husband to a member of the men's auxiliary of the First Wives Club. I like feelings more than data, yet there's a lot of data in this program. Many women may say, "Why can't you just tell me how you feel? That means a lot more to me than a statistic." How men feel is crucial. But if a man said, I just don't feel men are more violent to women than women are to men, most women would say, sorry, you're wrong, and also dismiss him as a chauvinist. Without responsible new information, no one can be asked to alter a paradigm. And that only occurs if we care enough to let the new information in. Until Rachel Carson wrote Silent Spring, we didn't have enough knowledge to care about the insecticides that poison our food. Women Can't Hear What Men Don't Say provides the knowledge to care about the myths which poison our love for men. The numbers help men know they're not alone, and they help women know these aren't just my opinions. It takes both the personal story and the numbers for a critical mass to care, and it's the caring that creates solutions. A woman who understands men understands her dad and discovers she was loved more than she knew, which allows her to love her husband more fully and nurture her son more completely. Okay, let's begin by looking at the secret to being loved, how to communicate with anyone, anywhere, anytime. The most important thing to understand about men is their desire to be understood. In fact, it's probably the most important thing to understand about anyone. In more than 30 years of conducting workshops, no one's ever said to me, Warren, I want a divorce. My partner understands me. What's so precious about being understood? First, it's rarer than a diamond. Often when we explain a problem to someone, they problem solve, or they criticize, or they reassure, thus discounting our pain. Or they say, I understand, but we feel our feelings are being dismissed rather than elicited. Most of us don't try to understand our partner, we try to analyze their faults. Yet I've never heard anyone say, Warren, I want to remain married. My partner has such an accurate analysis of my faults. This may help someone feel they understand us, but it doesn't leave us feeling understood. With about 50% of marriages ending in divorce, the fact that any one characteristic is associated with marital survival is really astonishing. And survival isn't the only victory that comes from understanding. People in relationships in which they feel understood usually want to be there. That's in contrast with a lot of marriages in which a couple is legally married, but psychologically divorced. On the surface, it seems men should feel understood. After all, as corporate heads and heads of households, don't men have the power to speak up about whatever they think? Yes, they do, about whatever they think, but not about whatever they feel. A man becomes successful by repressing his feelings, not expressing his feelings. It used to be that women didn't speak up either, especially around men. Women became passive-aggressive, that is, passively agreeing to do something but then not doing it. Or they agreed with the man to his face and expressed their real opinion to their women friends. Today, men are the passive-aggressive sex. We often hear today that it's natural for men to withdraw into their caves. Natural maybe, but functional no. When either sex suppresses their feelings, it's almost always because they don't feel there's a safe environment in which to express them. Many men fear that articulating feelings will lead to conflict. His wife is usually better at the conflict, so he often loses. But if he supposedly wins, she may withdraw emotionally or sexually into her cave. Either way, he loses. Cave is safer. Are so many men afraid of expressing feelings because they're afraid of intimacy? No, a man fears that conflict with his wife will lead to less intimacy, not more. He suppresses his feelings because he fears destroying the intimacy they do have. Men and women both fear loss of intimacy, but he fears discussion will leave him the loser, while she feels discussion will bring them closer. Even when it doesn't, her hope triumphs over her experience. From her perspective, the more he withdraws, the more alienated she feels. Thus, the more convinced she is that he doesn't want intimacy with her, or doesn't want intimacy, period. So depriving our partner of a safe environment to express feelings makes both sexes feel intimacy is hopeless. Providing a safe environment to express feelings is not the best way to get a man to express feelings. The best way is to choose a man who already expresses them. Our choice of partners is perhaps the clearest single statement of our values. Therefore, when we blame our partner for anything, we should really be confronting ourselves, not as in, I made a bad choice, but as in, How does this choice reflect my values? Most women genuinely feel they value a man's feelings. If she could have those feelings without making herself feel less secure, either emotionally or financially. But if a woman values security more, she often chooses a man who is successful at work rather than expressive at home. The problem is that the process required to succeed in most high-paying careers is inversely related to the process it takes to be vulnerable. If she likes his success but deplores his capacity for intimacy, she should be looking within herself and not blaming him. In the same way, if he's 40 and marries a beautiful 20-year-old, but then blames the 20-year-old for being immature, he should be confronting his values, not hers. While most of us can agree that our choice of partners is the best statement of our values, men continue to choose sex objects and women continue to choose success objects, and then both claim to want what's missing. Put another way, both sexes fall in love with members of the other sex who are the least capable of loving. Why? This is true because for millions of years, love was defined for women as finding a protector, and for men as finding both a young woman the longest number of years to reproduce, and a beautiful woman, the best genes. Falling in love with a man with a small wallet and big soul was a no-no. So women biologically selected men who were heroes. But the word hero is derived from the Greek word sero, S-E-R-O-W, from which we also get our words servant, slave, and protector. Servants were not expected to express feelings, but to repress feelings, just like heroes, just like corporate executives, just like surgeons and soldiers, just like engineers and CEOs. Women marrying killer-provider men and men marrying beautiful and young women is what I call our genetic heritage. Even if it is the socialization process that made us do it, once we have children and a marriage to a hero rather than an average man, we've contributed to a genetic selection of that hero's genes. Both sexes' genetic heritage is still with us, which is why there's no protest about only our sons registering for the draft. If we have integrity about our desire to support men to express feelings, every institution and attitude between the sexes requires questioning and adjusting. A question. If understanding each other is so valuable, why haven't we learned it already? Throughout history, we learned to survive by killing people who didn't understand us. We called them the enemy. Survival was more dependent on combat than it was on compassion. Haven't women, though, spent their lifetimes learning compassion? Yes, when someone is on their side. But neither sex learned compassion for people who argued with them. At the time of divorce, women are not more compassionate to men than men are to women. Under adversarial conditions, both sexes have learned much better debating skills than listening skills. Just go to a divorce court and see if anyone's listening. Another question. If I really want to be understood, what do I do? Well, if communicating effectively were easy, we'd already be doing it. But before you assume the effort is more than it's worth, let me tell you how much it's worth. Imagine having one relationship tool that would, more than any other, make your partner less likely to want to leave you. Now imagine the same tool being almost as likely to improve your relationships with your children, your parents, your employer, and your employees. If it took you as much time to learn this relationship language as it takes to learn a computer language, wouldn't it be worth it? The benefit of a computer language is that it opens up options our parents couldn't have dreamed of. The benefit of a relationship language is that it opens up a type of love no one could have imagined 50 years ago. There are two crucial tools to being understood in a relationship: giving criticism so it can easily be heard, and hearing criticism so it can easily be given. I'll begin with how to give criticism so it can easily be heard. Studies of happy marriages find that anger and criticism are expressed, not repressed, up to a point. And they find that the way they're expressed does count. The process begins with mastering the rules of the game to giving criticism. It's the responsibility of the criticizer or the person who is upset to abide by 5 rules of the game. Rule 1. Tone of voice is more crucial than words. Words don't hold a candle to the tone of our voice and the look in our eyes. Try using the words "I love you" in a malicious tone to a dog and watch it withdraw. Yet say in a loving tone, "Dumb doggy," and watch it be responsive. If the tone and the look reflect respect, appreciation, admiration, you'll melt any iceberg. Rule 2, don't complain too often. Rule 3, never criticize someone who has just criticized you. Wait until the person's felt heard. Rule 4, ask the listener to play listener. If they buy in, you have a partner. If they don't, you have an opponent. Rule 5, try not to cross-examine the listener with questions that require an explanation for their behavior. For example, don't say to the listener, "Why did you do that?" Sometimes, though, criticism spews from us like lava from a volcano, and for exactly that reason, it's a release of accumulated pressure. The question is there a way to avoid the buildup of that pressure? Yes, there is. That's what I call the plan ahead method. It's a method of giving criticism so it can easily be heard. Step 1, write down your negative feelings. For myself, I write my complaints on an index card and I put them in a box. Step 2, create a predictable time to share negative feelings, about once every week or two. Before a meeting, review the cards and choose between 3 and 6 issues that retain some negative energy. Once there's a predictable time each week, then turn the rest of the week into a no complaint zone. Step 3, share at least 4 positive feelings and specific things you appreciate about your partner before you share any one negative. Step 4, incorporate humor and romance into the feelings evening. Humor glues souls together and it reminds us that we're on the same team, as does romance. For myself, I like lighting candles and I like cutting flowers and turning on some music. My partner and I sit eye to eye. One of us starts by sharing 4 positives and then 1 criticism. Then we hold each other, in part for nurturance and in part really for congratulating ourselves. Then we alternate. That's 1 round. We continue until we complete between 3 and 5 rounds. Obviously, it's ideal to give criticism in this plan ahead mode, but sometimes we feel critical and we express it right away whether we really need to or not. The following steps are useful if you want to give spontaneous criticism so it can easily be heard. The first step is to identify your loved one's best intent, the best spirit of her or his strongest argument, and not do any distortion. For example, suppose Dad feels Mom is overprotecting the children by, let's say, preventing the children from taking their bikes to the 7-Eleven. If the first thing he says to her is why overprotecting creates dependent children, she's going to respond by defending her position. But once he identifies her best intent, she no longer needs to defend her position. He's defended it for her. So, for example, he may say, "I know you didn't let Alex and Aaron ride their bikes to the 7-Eleven because you didn't want them crossing the dangerous road. You're wise enough to know that it takes only 1 mistake on a dangerous road and the girls will be more capable of avoiding mistakes in a year or so. So why risk their lives?" Dad's now given her strongest argument without distortion, and he's identified her best intent. What this does is to free Mom to listen to his perspective rather than create her arguments while he's talking. Step 2, identify your partner's dilemma or struggle. If Dad also identifies Mom's dilemma, he deepens her feelings of being understood. For example, Dad might say, "I imagine you felt caught between wanting to allow Aaron and Alex to be independent and to please them, and on the other hand, wanting to make sure they're alive.